I'd like to thank AAEA support. We have Allison and Jessica helping us. If there are other AAEA staff members here, we give them a shout out to help us to coordinate and facilitate offering this storytelling event. I also want to acknowledge AAEA support, the board members supporting us, and the mentoring committee members supporting this event. Without any further ado, we will start with our first presenter, which is Dr. Madhu. It's your turn, Madhu.
Yep. Thanks, Kathleen, and thanks for organizing this. And thank you all for tuning in, especially to those who are doing it for the second time. Next slide, Kathleen. So I've summarized the timeline of the start of my academic career on this slide. My academic journey started 30 years ago with the PhD program at UC Berkeley. And it's been an exciting journey filled with a lot of uncertainties and challenges along the way, but also unimagined rewards. And the top portion of this, the lower portion shows what is on my resume, and the top portion shows the events that were behind it. I started the PhD program about 9 years after completing my master's in economics from the Delhi School of Economics. And during those 9 years, I was completely away from economics and academics. I was traveling around the world with my husband, who was in the Indian diplomatic service. And that is what brought us to San Francisco, where he was assigned to the Indian consulate. And so being close to Berkeley, I decided to see if I could get a PhD. I was not sure how I would fit in a 5-year PhD with a 3-year assignment that he had. But anyway, I got started. And soon after I submitted my application, I discovered that I had a baby on the way, and that it would really be a toss-up on what was going to come first, the start of the PhD program or the baby. And my daughter was born on the 11th of August in 1990, which gave me 10 days to get myself back on my feet and start the PhD program on the 21st of August. The first semester was really tough. It was more mathematical than I was prepared for. I had never used a computer or email or typed in any major way, and so it was overwhelming. But as you can see, the following semesters were equally challenging. Personally, with a second daughter born a year later, field exams, family moving back and forth across continents, and then a completion in about 5 years. So next slide, Kathleen. So this is just some of the examples of the challenges of learning to fit in, both culturally and professionally in those early years. The top picture is from my first midterm that I had in Jim Chauffant's class in ARE 201. This was in my first year at Berkeley, first take-home exam. When I got it back from him, there was this note which said, "Now you can say you nailed this." So I was really puzzled by this till I realized he was making a pun. He was referring also to my use of this common pin, as you can see on the left-hand corner, to pin the pages together. And this must have seemed so odd in a world where staples were commonplace. But I had been away from academics for so long, and so this was what I was used to. And so I've saved this exam just as a reminder of where I started. My first AAEA meeting was as a grad student in '94. This is the summer I was planning to go on the job market. And this was when AAEA was still an Ag-Econ association, as you can see. So it was very much agriculturally focused. And, I went to the meetings, didn't know too many people, met a senior professor from a Midwestern university who asked me what my research was about. I told him I was working on abatement of carbon emissions from power plants in India. And, he said that it would be really difficult with that topic and to find a fit in AAEA or to get a job in a Midwestern university, if you're not working on an ag topic. And that made me feel so alien at that meeting. But against all odds, I got this great job offer from Illinois, and I'm still here 25 years later. I did feel, however, the need to work on an ag-related topic after I came here, just so that I could fit into the Ag-Econ world, have something to present at AAEA meetings, after that. And so I shifted gears and started working on precision farming and other ag pollution related topics. The last example at the bottom is just to illustrate the challenges of learning to write and publish my first paper for my dissertation that took over 4 years. After I graduated, a lot of painful rejections, but it was an exercise in learning how to survive rejections and to persevere, and ultimately to learn how to write an academic paper. Next slide. This is just a picture of my family when I graduated and joined Illinois, had moved with my daughters. It was 3 and 5, major transition for my husband, and surviving the tenure track. And this is a recent Mother's Day card my daughters gave me, which really illustrates that it certainly takes a village and a vineyard to raise a family while on the tenure track. And so the next slide shows, that I could not have done this journey alone. These are some of the people that have had a hand in my succeeding in this challenging academic career, from my parents, my husband's parents, my mentors and role models, my colleagues and graduate students. And these are honestly all people who believed in me and saw much more in me than I saw in myself. And many of them took a chance in me before I had proven myself. And that's the kind of amazing village that you need in order to survive this. And I just want to, shout out to David Zilberman, who's sort of known me from the start of this journey 30 years ago. He really taught me how to fish and how to be prepared for this marathon of a journey. This is my vineyard that helps me get through, celebrate the successes and forget about the things that did not work out. And then, the next slide basically shows that, I never could have thought that I would get this far. Becoming editor of AAEA in 2013, fellow of AAEA in 2016, and then to be elected as president in 2020 was just, unbelievable. And really to bring this journey full back circle to where it started, it was really a profound moment for me to be recognized in Berkeley's ARE department homepage, when I was selected as president of AAEA. And it's just been such an honor and such a rewarding, career to go through. And I want to leave you with this last, set of thoughts, which is that if I could do it, you can certainly do it. And all it takes is really wanting to do it and, pursuing these opportunities, persevering, and really making it a priority. And there's, certainly you will achieve if you do all of that. All right, so I'll stop with that, Kathleen, and happy to take questions at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Madhu. Appreciate. And we will ask everybody to type in your questions in the chat box, and we'll come back for an interactive Q&A after everybody shares a summary of their story. Now it's your turn, Titus.
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this panel. First, I'd like to say that just like Madhu said, a lot of my successes, I can connect it with some people at some point in my life that have made a huge contribution. So I'd like to begin by saying that when I look back at my careers, one phrase from the Hebrew scriptures that really stood out to me is a saying that you shouldn't despise humble or small beginnings. Where you started in life shouldn't define where you end up. I think many of us can say that about our life experiences. Many times we face obstacles. It's really how we deal with those obstacles that defines who we become. And the quote by Booker T. Washington that you see on the slide there really summarizes that for me. That success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. As I look back, born in Lagos, Nigeria, a few decades ago, I can see and remember some really great times with my family, but I can also remember some challenging times and obstacles that I faced as a young man. But I really appreciate the experiences, the culture, the people, and my family played a really big role in my success as a person. So moving forward, I think that education has played a really big part of my life. And one of the things that I remember, and I have many memories, is the kind of education that I had as a young man. What you see in front of you in the picture there is an example of something that I remember from high school. I was the class president during my second year in high school, and I had the responsibility of recording the attendance of each of the teachers that come to teach the various subjects. What you see there in the third column, and what you have in front of you really captures 1 week and is very typical of many of the weeks. You will see the column where the signature of the teachers should be. It's not always filled up. There are days when only 2 people show up. So as you can tell, there are gaps in my training because the curriculum was not followed and the teachers were not always there. But one thing that I really appreciate though is that even though my parents were not able to send me to private school because they didn't have the means to do so, I was able to make up for some of those gaps with the help of people in my church, people in the community who are a few years ahead of me. And I found that to be the case in graduate school too. So despite many of the obstacles, I was able to make most of the limited opportunities that I have. And I think that that's key, that we will face obstacles, but we need to find ways to overcome them with the help of other people. So I was a first generation college graduate, but I'm glad to say that my sisters, I have 4 sisters, they all followed in my footsteps. Even though in my extended family, I was the first one to go to college, all my sisters have all gone through college since then. So I'm very proud of what our parents were able to do with the help of our community. So I came to the United States as a teenager. I attended Berea College. But when I first arrived in the US in Louisville, Kentucky, I did not start out at Berea College. I actually started out at the community college because I had some gaps in my training. And also we couldn't afford the tuition at the regular school. But I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship after the community college experience at Berea College. And from there, I went to Morris State University, also in Kentucky, to do my master's degree. And then ultimately, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do my doctorate degree at Texas A&M. Still have many memories of people across the board that contributed to my success in the program. So in terms of my path to academic leadership, I started out as a regular faculty member at University of Delaware, and I progressed from assistant professor to full professor in the same department with the support of a lot of people. My portfolio is very similar to what many of you have, research, teaching, and service. And I was able to do as well to get through the promotion process. Now, I thought I was just going to focus on my research and teaching because I didn't really have much interest in academic administration. But when there was time for transition from one department chair to another, several of my colleagues came to me and said, have you considered doing this? And I said, no, I haven't, and I'm not interested. But there was enough persistence from others that I began to really think about that. Now the rest is history. So I was chair of the department at Delaware for about 4 years, and then moved to Michigan State in 2015 to play the same role. My approach to leadership is being focused and centered on people. Programs and processes will take care of themselves if you really focus on people. Next slide, please. So I would like to summarize by providing some reflections as I look back on my own academic journey. And there are 3 things that I really want to emphasize here. The first is that where you started shouldn't define where you end up. We will always have obstacles, as I mentioned at the beginning, but how we deal with those challenges and barriers that we face really define us. And I faced several in my own journey. But I find that maximizing the few opportunities that I have by being committed and dedicated to working hard are very critical in my life journey. And I think that this is applicable to many people that you hear from today too. The second area is about the importance of mentorship to success. I didn't even know anything about agricultural economics. It was my advisors during my undergraduate that kind of talked to me about the relevance of agricultural economics. I was in an econ program and he said, because you're interested in development, have you considered agricultural economics? And he walked me through that and he helped me to look at different graduate programs. And then once I get into the graduate programs, I had mentors like David Bessler and Oral Capps and several other people like that at Texas A&M that really walked me through the process and helped encourage me to go through the program successfully. So we all need a helping hand from other people along our journey. And I think that this is very important for everyone. The last point that I'll close with is that technical skills are necessary. And we all get that from our studies, but they're not sufficient for success. I think it's very important to grow your soft skills, your people skills, and learn the strategies for effectively cultivating and relating to mentors and people who can strongly advocate for you. I'll take questions later on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Titus. Appreciate. We'll save plenty of time for people to ask questions. And again, for the people who participate, we welcome to the storytelling session. And please type your questions you want to interact with the panelists at the end of the storytelling part. Jeff, you ready?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff O'Hara. I'm an economist at USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. And when Kathleen reached out to me and asked me to be on this panel, I was looking around, being like, how do I belong here? I see other AAEA presidents and other AAEA board members and people that have been, I think, these incredibly successful personal stories, and I felt like mine didn't really fit in as cleanly with that. So for me, I was thinking, what different thing do I have to say than these other extremely successful panelists? And for me, I feel like a story of my career has been 6 words that I have really taken to heart, and where I've really experienced struggles I've always come back to, which is, try again, and fail better. And I'll talk a little bit about my journey along the way, but these have been words that have really, that I've really stuck with, because as I've moved through the professional economist ranks. I think for me, one of the inherent tensions, which I became aware of in graduate school, when I went to a traditional economics department, and I realized as I was, at a traditional economics department, not an ag econ program, that I really did not have an ivory tower personality. And then because I had a more outreach focused, practitioner focused personality and interest was interested in policy, was interested in the real world, I knew that a traditional, academic career wasn't really calling out to me, but at the same time, because I wasn't familiar with the land grant system and I wasn't familiar with AAEA, I didn't really see sort of an obvious path forward through those doors. And as a result, I've been bouncing around a little bit. Next slide, please. So I went to UC San Diego, really at the time was interested in environmental issues, but didn't really grasp, agricultural economics as a profession, and didn't have that sort of professional grounding. I didn't have a professional home. So I took a job at the Chicago Climate Exchange, which is a publicly traded company. Then I went to the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is nonprofit advocacy. And then I went to the Agricultural Marketing Service, which is government job, but it's not even really a part of the USDA that's focused on research in the way that ERS is. It's more about developing market opportunities. So all three jobs, while they were different on the one hand in terms of the types of organizations, they were all very much jobs in which there was a strong emphasis on outreach and extension as sort of the most important thing in my job portfolio, and research as a secondary component to my job description. Next slide, please. And it's been a struggle not having, that stability, and the fact that I've had, I've been out for 13 years now, and I'm on my third job. This is a picture of, when I was, younger, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go work on environmental markets because I care about the environment, and, because I, have a lot of interest in economics, this will be a great person, this will be a great fit for my skill set. And this is a picture of protesters getting arrested in front of the Chicago Climate Exchange because they thought that we, didn't have rules that were protective or strong enough for the environment. So this was really a culture shock for me. Maybe shows how naive I was at that point in my life and my career, thinking that, that I was going to go, have this job and working at an exchange where people would perceive it as being good for the environment, and so for people to, feel strongly enough against what I was doing that they would actually get arrested in the street was a shock for me. And the Chicago Climate Exchange eventually went out of business, and I lost my job. So that was, I was not in a position at that point professionally to easily get another one. Unity of Concerned Scientists, again, I had some good things, but that didn't work out either. So, repeating some comments here that have already been made, I really had to focus on, it's for me, it's really wanted to focus on the journey, it's the journey, really focus on the process. And Kathleen, you can kind of show the next few bullets here. And for, it was tough psychologically, I guess, was the larger point, because, I'm 8 years out. I've had 2 jobs that haven't worked out. This is now in 2015. One job, the place went out of business entirely. Another job, it didn't work out for me. I'm looking around, my peers are doing well. I'm still struggling. I've made, I'm on my third kind of entry level job. And I think what really for me psychologically, what was important was really to focus on, or am I doing, what makes me happy, and I tried to spend a little less time worrying about how other people were doing, tried to spend a little more energy focused on how I was doing and how I was feeling and whether I felt like I was adding value when I could. And I think that that's led to some more internal fulfillment and sort of internal gratification. Despite the struggles I'd had, I learned to sort of be happier and more accepting of myself. And that was really, I think, important for me professionally for this to continue to work. Kathleen, next slide, please. I think for me, and the topic I picked for local foods also kind of worked out well for me timing-wise. When I started on local foods as a topic in 2011, it was, sort of, I guess I would call it a kind of a fringe topic. There was not a lot of great data. It was, research tended to be like, case studies or, surveys with very small samples or input-output modeling. And, over the last, I guess, 9 years, the topic has developed and there's been more data available. And that has allowed my scholarship and my research to improve hand in hand. So as my professional growth has been, in that sense, been able to align with opportunities that have become available in the field that I've chosen. And so in that sense, I kind of lucked, in a professional sense, I kind of lucked out. And that's been able to open doors for me. It's also, improved my confidence and helped me sort of establish, get some grounding and establish a home for myself within a profession, which is AAEA, which I was unable to do for years. I think one more slide, maybe just one more slide, Kathleen. So just, hey, while I have the floor here, just wanted to talk about some things that had worked for me, some tricks that had worked for me for other, maybe for other extension or outreach economists that are on this webinar. I think, good writing, I think is always something that, us as extension and outreach economists, we can always fall back on. I think that's something that we're good communicators, so we always could be good writings. I think obviously being white and working on, food systems, that's been a journey. I know the AAEA is making, some good progress with trying to work on racial equity issues within the profession. I think for white economists, we don't have to know all the answers but we can still be a part of the conversation and still be a part of that dialogue. I think for outreach and extension economists, ethics is a big topic This is something Kathleen has also talked about before, and then really to view stakeholders as collaborators in the long term and partners with data collection and research projects. And, because we, those of us like myself and others that do outreach and extension, we can sometimes get insights from practitioners. They have really keen understanding of markets sometimes that we may not be able to get those from academic conferences. And so in that sense, that can give us an advantage too. And those are something that for those of us that have really strong outreach and extension responsibilities, those are things we can use to our advantages as well. I think that's my last slide, but thank you, Kathleen, for the invitation, and look forward to the dialogue going forward.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Jeff, even though he was very humble in the beginning, saying that he wasn't sure why we identified him as a leader. Well, as a matter of fact, Jeff has been a very important liaison for many, many agriculture research programs, linking us to USDA, particularly the Agriculture Marketing Service Division. If you would like to have more information, please feel free to be in touch with Jeff, because he has been a champion for the AAEA profession, and we really appreciate your contribution to our success. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, last but not least, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah,
if you remember nothing else, remember this.
That's a good one, Jeff. Appreciate, really appreciate. So true. Now the next person is Yoko. Yoko, are you ready to share your story?
Yes, I am. I hope everyone can hear me. So I'm officially, I think, the most junior person on this panel. This is my very first webinar where I'm a panelist, so I'm really nervous. And if there's any disturbance, it's because both my sons are upstairs and they're being as quiet as they can. But anyway, my name's Yoko, and I've been an associate professor in the Ag Econ department at the University of Kentucky for a few months now. And I got my PhD from the Ag Econ program at UC Davis in development economics. So for those of you who are familiar with the Ag Econ department at UK, you might be surprised that they would hire an international development person. And the short story is that I was a trailing spousal hire. My husband was hired 2 years before me in the econ department, and I just came here without much of a plan. So my first position here at the University of Kentucky was in fact in the economics department, and I was a lecturer, which is great because I got my teaching chops, and my only job at that time was to teach. Eventually though, people in the econ department negotiated and talked and worked out a lot of stuff for the provost with the Ag Econ department, and this position was created for me. So I entered the department in Ag Econ, and it is an amazing department. It feels like family. We act like family. And so that emotional part was wonderful. But the professional part always felt uneasy because, I didn't feel like, well, at this time, UK Ag Econ doesn't have too many people working in international development. So not only was I having to ask myself, okay, how am I going to continue doing development? But am I going to continue doing development? And if I'm not going to do development, what am I going to do? So it was a very uncomfortable 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 years. But I then had 3 big breaks, and I now realize that I probably should have gotten permission from these 3 people to put their pictures in my slideshow. I haven't gotten permission from them. I hope they don't mind. But so my story is about going from really, really scared to still being scared, but thinking I can do this because I had 3 big breaks, or 3 people who really helped me along the way. So the first is Karen Rignall. She's on the left there, and you'll notice that it says cultural anthropologist underneath there. So 1 year after arriving at Kentucky, I was approached by a cultural anthropologist. She had finished her PhD, and she had these hypotheses that she wanted to test from rural Morocco about land and exchange of labor and reciprocity, but she wanted to use economics techniques to test them out because she had training as an anthropologist, not as an economist. So she said, would you advise me on this? And so she She went ahead and wrote this gigantic NSF grant. She got $250,000, and I got to be her faculty advisor on that. And so Karen and I have been working for 10 years now, and we've published 2 papers. We've been trying for the past 3 years to publish our last paper together. And I learned so much from her. So technically I was her advisor, but she was advising me much more than I was advising her, whether she knew it or not. One thing that I learned is that, just because we're writing applied economics studies doesn't mean that we can ignore the literature that's not applied economics. So what I'm trying to say is you can understand your data a lot better if you dig into like the anthropology literature, the sociology literature, the geography literature, all the other literature. Karen taught me that. So that was my first big break. My second big break is with Dave Van Sanford. He's in the middle there. And you'll notice that he's also not an economist. He's a wheat breeder. I think maybe 2 or 3 years into my being at Kentucky, Dave approached me and he said, well, we need a social scientist on a NOAA grant. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he had another NIFA grant that he needed a social scientist on. So I had never worked on a grant proposal before, certainly never, no, I never had, and certainly not anything this big. And so I was really nervous. And I said, Dave, I'm not sure I can contribute very much. And then he said something that really set me free. He said, grant proposals are as much about what you would like to know than they are what you already know. So just go crazy. And if as long as it's not too crazy, you've got a chance. So I went big and creative on my parts of the grant proposals. And while neither of them was funded, the reviewers actually really liked the parts that I wrote. And so that gave me the confidence to see if I can pull them off some other way with different funding or no funding. And I pulled them off. And they turned out to be really good ways for me to go into different types of economics research. And I really appreciated that. So Dave was my second big break. My third big break, and I'm sure some of you will recognize this woman, but this is Melinda Smale. She's at Michigan State. And I had always been interested in crop genetic diversity. That's the only reason why I even went to graduate school and got a PhD. Things didn't work out that way, so my dissertation wasn't on it, but I still wanted to pursue that. So maybe 4 years into my being at Kentucky, I just cold called her. She did not know who I was. I had been reading her work for 15 years now. I just emailed her introducing myself, saying, I'm really interested in crop genetic diversity. I've been reading your work. I have a little bit of money to fly someone out for a departmental seminar. Could you please come out? And she graciously accepted. She gave a seminar that just set the bar for me forever in terms of like what a seminar should look like. And then she invited me to work on a paper with her. And this just changed my trajectory. She taught me really basic things, but things that I didn't know. Like this is how you write a revision. I can't, author's revisions. I can't think of the word right now. Yeah, response to reviewers, that's it. This is how you write that. These are the journals that tend to publish in this area. And, these journals take forever for their turnaround. All those sorts of behind the scenes ropes she taught me. But I think the most important thing was that she treated me like a colleague. This woman who in my eyes was a superstar was treating me like an equal. And that boosted my confidence like nothing else, especially when I needed it. So next slide, please. So I write the title to this slide with kind of tongue in cheek, but I was like, okay, well, what have I learned from this other than like be lucky? Because that's not really a policy implication, right? So the 4 takeaways that I would, I've concluded from this 10-year trajectory is that interesting questions appear at interdisciplinary borders. And so when someone says, well, we need a social scientist on this grant proposal, if it's not completely out of your wheelhouse or if it seems interesting, I would say yes, because you're going to get to work on this really neat interdisciplinary team and maybe even do this really great interdisciplinary research. The second thing that I would say is say hi to everyone and introduce yourself, because even if you don't think you're going to work directly with them, there's lots of people always working and talking and networking behind the scenes that end up helping you get where you need to get. So just about every person in my department, you know, we don't work in the same areas, but they have played integral, amazing roles in finally letting me make it, right? Making me survive this assistant professor period. They all helped me because they knew me because I said hello and introduced myself. Okay. The next one is, I'm going to quote one of my favorite comic book characters, but take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. So you need to get uncomfortable with uncertainty, you know, make those cold calls. They might not ever respond, but they might. And if they do, it can be awesome. And then my last point is get comfortable with uncertainty and exploring new areas. So, you know, I have kids and I drive them places, and more often than not, I get lost, right? So I just tell them, you know, when we're driving somewhere and I get lost, it's not a road trip, it's an adventure. Okay, next slide, please, Kathleen. So I couldn't fit as many pictures as Madhu did. I don't think anyone could do that. But I'm going to end with a slide of all these people who have guided me. You know, I'm still as scared as I was 10 years ago, but it's thanks to all these people that they have told me, like, you should jump to here next. You can do this. Talk to this person. You belong here. Let's work together. They have inspired me, supported me, and taught me really important lessons. So this is my village. Thank you. And
Thank you, Yoko. Thank you so much. Very inspiring. And we'll come back to share some questions, and people would like to interact with you more. Now, our last storyteller, but absolutely not the least, is our very famous Dr. David Zilberman. David has been a strong supporter and a true believer of our profession for as long as I could remember. So it's really an honor to have you, David, to lead this adventure for us. David, it's all yours. And I know that you have this one slide, so I'm going to watch your time, David. All right?
Okay. Okay, so let me tell you my story. I was born in Jerusalem to a low middle class family. I went to a public school. It was a really terrible public school, but me and two other guys went to high school, and I went to a really good high school. Then I went to the army. I spent there about 4 years, and I was in the kibbutz, and I learned a lot about agriculture there. And after the army, I had to go back home. So in order to go to the university, I needed to work full time. So I took a class in the computer how to be a programmer, and I work full time as a programmer and then system analyst. And then I got my degree in economics and statistics. I was a student in Tel Aviv University, and one day the chairman asked me, "Oh, God, you're really a good student. Take econometrics and consider it PhD." Now, I actually got promoted very well in my job. I was responsible for a payroll system, but I worked too hard, and I decided I'll try to go to America, get a PhD, and have fun. I applied to, 500 million schools. I was accepted to Chicago and Berkeley, several others. And I have a choice between Berkeley and Chicago. And I used a very important source of information, the movies. At Berkeley, there's a movie called The Graduate. Chicago, there was a movie called Godfather, and I decided I want to have a girlfriend and rather to be dead. So I came to Berkeley. So when I came to Berkeley, it was really tough because I really didn't have a lot of money. And I got a fellowship that was sufficient for room, board, and fees. So basically, gosh, how could I pay to go out on a date, like, and, I really didn't know a lot of people, and it's really difficult for a foreign student. And you feel that you are in a disadvantage. I would go to the international house. People speak about Akerlof. I didn't know if Akerlof was a person or a thing. So I was really intimidated. And the first semester, man, I worked really hard. I didn't watch basketball, nothing. And at the end of the semester, I realized that I get good grades, so I start really feeling good, being confident. And the one thing that really helped me was that I was an RA. And being an RA, I took it seriously. They told me to do some work about animal waste. And God, this is really a dirty topic, and no one wrote anything about it. And I figured out, since no one wrote anything about it and it has an externality, I will start to do something about it. Now, the people that I work with, again, they wanted to apply externalities. And I spoke with practitioners, and that's my computer background helped me, and I really slowly developed some sort of modeling capacity and developed a model that was different than anyone else. Now, the good thing was I had about 4 mentors that were really great. One was a guy named Eitan Ochman, who was a postdoc from Israel, and he, like me, was really lost. So we wrote some paper together. It was a blind leading the deaf. Then there was Richard Glass, that was really my introduction to the English work. And then Andy Schmitz that invited me to his house and encouraged me to try to go to big journal. And then Rauser that spoke with me about life. Because generally people don't speak about life. And to me, having a girlfriend was much more important than writing a paper at the time. So anyhow, slowly I start rejected, but since I start earlier, I got used to rejections, and every rejection to me I found is a source for inspiration. So I got paper, it was rejected twice, and one time someone told me to try another job, but after 2 rejections, it was published in Econometric. But that really is my story. Behind every big success, there are about 20 stories that failures that no one knows. And what matters is the achievement. So then I got married, and my wife, it was ex-wife now, didn't want to leave Berkeley. So I tried to teach everywhere, and I looked for a job in the department. I was doing environment, they had a job in Ag-Econ, and I told it many times to the student. If you have 2 or 3 months, you can pivot to every field. I knew nothing about agriculture, only working in the kibbutz. I knew a little bit the difference between cow and a chicken, but in 3 months I became the biggest expert in agriculture because I feel myself, I knew name, and when I gave a seminar, I took my work on the environment. From the solid waste, I make cows, and people thought, these guys know about ag. I didn't know. So once I got the job, I totally switched my work towards Ag-Econ. I think what Madhu did. I basically, on my own pocket, I traveled, met with farm advisor, learned stories of others so I could really start working and then introduce economics. Now, unlike most economists, I don't really think that we know a lot and everything else is dummy. On the contrary, I all the time try to learn things from people from other disciplines. So when I study irrigation, I realize that they care about land quality and water holding capacities. They don't give a damn about risks. So everyone told me, oh, you have to write a paper about risk. So I wrote a lot of paper about risk, but I want to sell it to people. And that's what happened. I started work on pesticide and water, everything starting to work with practitioners. So altogether, after several years, I moved from one topic to another. Well, I learned 2 things. First, if no one else did anything and socially it's important, do it. It's much tougher to be number 2 than to be number 1. And even worse to be number 30. You have to be super sophisticated technically, and they will reject you. If you are the first one, you are king. My papers on pesticide originally were really simple, but they were cited, and the same as water. The same thing is combine slight theory and stories in real life with empirics. But the most important thing is build alliances. So altogether, if I really look at what are some of the key elements that I learned in my career, it's first you have to work hard. There is no other trick. but more the work makes the work fun. Now, I like people, so I always try to build teams. I remember that people told me, oh, you don't get a tenure if you don't have single author papers. I knew that for me, it's really hard. I get bored with myself. If I myself, I watch a basketball game. So I start working. So you have twice as many people. And if you are a good collaborator, these people are your biggest advocate. So work with other people. The other thing is respect your mentor and invest in your student and don't overclaim. If you have a debate about authorship, it's better to underclaim than overclaim. Because if you overclaim, you make enemies. If you underclaim, people appreciate it. So I think that to some extent, you have to realize that you have an ongoing relationship with people. And what really matters is not what people say to yourselves, but they say behind your back. The other thing that I remember everyone told me, you have to write paper, don't do service, don't do anything else. For me to write paper all the time, I would die in suffocation in my room. But then I realized that I was inspired by my teaching. I'm not the greatest teacher in the world, but I learn more from my classes than my students, and they inspired my papers. But the other thing that I learned is the service is important because you know other people, you learn a lot of other problems. At the end, you want people to cite you and appreciate your work. So I went to every AAEA meeting. I tried to go to every meeting. Because you go to the meeting and I socialize and make friends and try to make presentation because that's the way that you grow. So altogether, I think that if I look at this career is first, really realize that everyone is nervous when they start. Man, I was afraid so many times that I would be sent back to Israel and I couldn't look at my mom in the eye. And a lot of time you don't have some money. I really know, I really appreciate all you can eat Chinese food for $3. That was popular then. And you really, a lot of time you feel you have rejection, and once in a while you reject it, so you try again. That's number one. Number two, try to develop social relationship. Try to be updated and to know what's going on in the news, and try to have fun in your work. If you don't like it, it's not worth it. And the other thing is socialize. I remember people told me socializing is a waste of time. It's not a waste of time, but optimize. I mean, don't say, oh, Zilberman told me that I can drink now. But try to really to find a way to mix your work, the real world, and some sort of socialization. And I think if you want it, you are able to get it. Thanks.
Thank you, David. It's really intriguing to hear your story. Many of us probably grew up in the profession, reading your paper, admiring your spirit, your support to students and the colleagues, and now you're sharing another part of the career path that I think absolutely inspired many, many of us. And we would love to hear from you more. And then now I'm going to start with the questions. We have received the questions prior to this webinar event, and we also have a couple questions in the chat box. So I'm going to facilitate the process. So all the panelists, please be prepared. I'm going to call your name, and then you're going to start answering these questions for us. So let's go to Titus first. Titus, there is a question particularly for you. You ready?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, the question said, what tips do you have for junior faculty working with graduate students that face more challenges than the average graduate students?
I would say that's a tough question. Where I would begin is to suggest having a candid conversation with the graduate student. One, to gauge the level of their passion for the field. And then secondly, to help them to self-assess and evaluate what gaps do they have in their skill set, quantitative skills, writing skills, analytical skills, and help them not just saying that in a general way, but as specifically as you can. And then help them to identify resources, either by directing them to some other individuals or faculty in the department or in the university, or even resources online to help them identify how they can meet those gaps. Then you then figure out as the advisor, how much help can I provide? Especially when you're a junior faculty, there's a lot of pressure on you in the promotion and tenure process. So you need to publish, you have to do your research and provide service. So you have that pressure, and you are as good to your students as you are in being fair to yourself, in having in building a successful career. So there has to be good balances. So you want to be empathetic, but you also have to be candid and be balanced in the kind of communication and discussions that you have with that student. And then whichever area you can provide specific help in the gap areas that you identify, you provide as much as you can, and direct them to some other people that can also help them.
Thank you, Titus. And that's such a wonderful question. I think a lot of the junior faculty will benefit from your information. And again, this is interactive. So if other people have other suggestions, please type in the chat box. We will save the chat information. And my role as a facilitator, I also volunteer to write up today's discussion summaries and publish on AAEA blog. So all of our membership will be able to access your wisdom and your sharing. The next question is an interesting one, because we all have been in the profession fairly long, except Yoko and Jeff, and I see you both as a relatively younger generation. The next question, we will start with Madhu. The question is very simple, and I will only give each panelist one sentence to respond. So just to be fair, all right? So get ready, one sentence answer here, okay? The question is, if you would choose your career to start again as a graduate student, what would you do differently? We will start with Madhu. And one sentence.
Okay, I would be, less intimidated and shy to reach out to people. I would talk to more people and tell them about my research. I wish I'd done that more and earlier.
How about you, Yoko?
I would echo what Madhu said. I feel like, especially in my first 3 or 4 years, I was crippled by just kind of a lack of confidence. And so I would give myself vitamin C shots. With the C's are confidence and courage.
Thank you. David, how about you? One sentence. What would you do differently going way back as a grad student?
Oh, I think I will actually take more classes. I realize that most of what I learned, most what I did was based on the learning that I took in different classes, and I don't think that I wasted information from any class, and sometimes lack of knowledge stopped me. I wish I also took more classes during my career. Always renew your knowledge.
Thank you, David. How about you, Jeff?
I mean, for me, I would have prioritized my mental and emotional health a lot more than I did. I thought that was, when I was, younger, I thought that was an opportunity cost from doing research or doing all these other things that I thought were super important at the time. I didn't really realize that, I didn't really see it as a long game, and kind of thought, well, if I just ignore these other issues over here on the side, they'll go away. And I think that was, not, in retrospect, that was regrettable. If I could do it over again, I would do that differently.
Thank you. And Titus, we'll come to you.
I think what I would have done differently is to make more time. I know it's hard to find time to read biographies and books and literature that are not economics, so that I could have a wider breadth to my understanding of real life situations that could then inform my work in agricultural economics.
Thank you so much. And I think I can contribute a little bit. If I would start again, I will actually listen to David's comment. We got to find a fun school to start with. Purdue is absolutely an outstanding school, but you know, his priorities on girls. I got to set my priorities to start with. I didn't set that priority right to start with. So thank you, David. Now I know. Maybe I have another thing to look forward to the next 50 years. All right. Okay. Now the next question is also a very interesting interaction among the speakers. How would you deal with the pressure? I guess this question you can think back when you are building the career and give us a contrast situation as a now if you still have to deal with the pressure. So give us a little bit of perspective as the beginning and as a now, that what you do to handle the pressure situation. And this time we're going to start with Yoko.
So one thing that helped to put professional pressure into perspective was having a family. And the irony is that you have a lot less time. But no matter what you're thinking about or how much self-pity you're wallowing in when you get home, or once you pick your kids up at school, it's not about you anymore. And so it's a break from thinking about professional pressure. And so I would actually say diversify your portfolio of things that you care about, of things that are important for you. And maybe you'll spend a little less time stewing on what worries you.
Great advice. How about you, Titus? What do you do to handle the pressure, whether it's in a different time frame or as a current situation as a department chair?
I do two things. I've always been a believer in having a balance between different parts of your life. For me, that means that I need to take care of my intellect. I also need to take care of myself as a spiritual being. For some people, that's praying. For some people, is spending quality times with other people. Anything that inspires you. So I try to make time for that, so I can have time to meditate and just kind of look inward and then outward. So that really helps me. Something that also helps me is I really love music. So when I'm going through the hardest time, and my tastes are eclectic, but listening to music, I could listen to music for maybe 2 hours nonstop. YouTube is great now because you could type in the different kind of things that you want to see. And that really helps me to relieve stress. I sing along, and the next thing I know, my emotions have totally taken 180 degrees. So, yeah. And I love playing sports too.
Great, thank you. How about you, Madhu?
So I deal with stress and pressure by making extensive to-do lists and really figuring, after I find that it actually a lot of the stress goes away the moment I make the list of what I need to do and when I'm going to do it, and then being able to pace myself ahead of time helps me to know that it can be done. In addition to that, I love listening to audiobooks and getting, immersing myself in that. That helps to take my mind off a lot of the other stressful things. So, when I'm driving to work and so on, I'll have my audiobook, and so that's my other technique. And lastly, just learning not to take things too personally, and if things don't go well, get over it quickly, forget about it, and just move on. Don't dwell on those kinds of, don't dwell on it as much as possible after it's done.
Now, Jeff, I have a related question coming to you because we have a similar question in the chat box, but I think you and David will contribute to this in a more vivid way. One question relates to stress pressure is somebody asked the question, how do you do when people have failed so many times in our profession trying to find the jobs or publications or grant applications? They're tremendous failure and trigger the pressure and the stress actually. So for you, Jeff, what would it be some of the strategies that might help others to handle the failure and the rejections created the pressure and the stress?
Yeah, it's there's not a simple answer. Obviously, I think being perspective and humble is always good, and just kind of focusing on whether you can add value and trying to not like, well, don't think of yourself as, well, this job or this thing might be beneath me or anything like that. Focus on where you can add value. I have started meditating now in the last few years myself, and then there's even if you don't have time in your day to meditate, there's also like breathing exercises you can do. Like even on this Zoom right now, there's like techniques called 4-7-8 where you like take a deep breath for 4 seconds and hold it for 7 and exhale for 8. I mean, there's lots of breathing techniques and stuff that you can do even at a meeting or even at your desk that can help work on getting your heart rate down. And so all those things, I think just little things, if you don't have time in the day to properly meditate, there's like lots of little techniques that you can look to do that sometimes can help in the aggregate, and they can help you with sleeping and all the other things that go into, keeping your body healthy on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Jeff. And David, I have a special question for you. Several people asked a question about finding co-authors, collaborators throughout the career path, how to reach out to people. I believe you will be the best person to handle this question because you have many success and many opportunities to help other people to join in collaborative effort. Would you say a few words about that?
Two things. No, the one thing that I think what Yoko said was really important. Try to have other interests in life besides academic life. The toughest time in my life was when I was an assistant professor, a graduate student in Berkeley in my little room, and it was basically PhD or bust. When you have a family, then realize everything is in proportion. Because no rejection is as tough as a divorce. So I think stuff like this you have to remember. Everything is in proportion. Now, generally, the way I find the co-authors is, in the beginning, I would have a problem and I ask someone, because how do you solve this problem? I remember I had a paper that I needed to do linear programming to solve a problem. I knew how to solve the mathematics, but I don't know exactly how to use a package. So I brought someone and I said, I have this problem. And I said, let's work together. And the key element is that you develop a team. The key element is that the person say, oh God, it's more than what they think about it in the beginning, and you are excited. And the other thing, if when you work with someone, they don't do what you expect them to do, this is a tough moment. Either at a certain time, somehow you find a gentle way to say, we will do something else, or you give them more time and you encourage them and you speak with them. So I really think the biggest success for me was to have people that are not Einsteins, but somehow I help them to find their own way by not giving them up. Now, for me, there are two things that I always like to do. To go with people to coffee and speak about everything else in life and then slowly move back to the work, or to go for a walk. The worst thing is to have a formal meeting when you say, let me tell you about your career, and this is, because then the people feel like he's an accused, and you really want to develop a feeling that you are in a team rather than you are in a situation that it's you against the other person.
That's great. And following on David's and everybody's comment, I've been working with all kinds of people throughout my career for over 30 years now. I counted purposely, I probably worked with over 150 disciplines through over 100 projects. And everyone is interdisciplinary, everyone is multi-institutional to a certain level that I did what Yoko did, just a call. I studied the literature, who is famous in the field, in what perspective, and identify the schools that I want to learn something from. Instead of looking for somebody to work with me, I like to find out who can help me to learn better throughout my career. And I just call those people, contact those people, email them. I can tell you all honestly that I have not received a no while I have people being silent. I think that's a clear no. But they're very kind. They don't say no, but they just don't respond. So if you get people don't respond to you, there's nothing personal. They're busy people. They're very precious time. You know, they may not be interested in the topic. So there are all different opportunities. But please don't take a rejection as a personal, because that will only trigger more stress and more pressure in your life. People don't know you, and the people said no to me many, many times. So it's just take it easy, take a deep breath. I like what Jeff said, that deep breathing method. I love it. I think that's just a part of the career we all have to test it out. And before we continue with more questions, I would like you to put your name and your email in the chat box if you are willing to be the storyteller for our future series. This is not a one-time shot. We are opening the door to invite agriculture and applied economists in any part of your career, in any part of the world, to join us to share your story. We want to make it welcoming, warming, and personal, as an informal way to help people to build our network. Because many people ask the question, how do you do network when we cannot be together? Look, we have 50-some people here together at this one point in time. This is a precious opportunity for us to build a network. So please type in your name and your email contact information. So we will follow up with you. We have every other month planned to have the storytelling event with everybody. We already have people sign up, but I'm inviting more people to sign up as a colleague. So feel free to join us and leave your name and your contact information in the chat box. Move on to our questions. Now the questions are getting tougher. Okay, so panelists, are you ready? This is getting tougher now. Okay, not funny stuff anymore. We have a few questions about career guidance, because obviously this is a very difficult time for any profession, but for social scientists, it's even tougher to find good jobs. Any few words about encouraging people in the job market that they're struggling at this point? Madhu, would you like to start with that conversation?
Sure. I think this we've had a session before on what PhD students, or people on the job market can do now, and while given this current situation where jobs are relatively few, job offerings are relatively few, and I'd encourage people to actually go back and listen to that webinar as well. But if you're a graduate student and have the option of actually staying on and extending your program for a while, use this time to publish papers from your dissertation. There may be, there are still postdoc opportunities that are coming up. I see them popping up, much more frequently than in the past, for whatever reason. And so, that's another way to bridge this year and prepare yourself to be even, have a stronger resume after this. Think about using this time, if you have the option, to submit grants and see if you can get some funding that could launch you into a postdoc career where you are. So those would be some of the suggestions I would have, Kathleen.
How about you, Titus?
I'll just start out by saying that my first job was not in academia. When I finished my PhD, my first job was in industry, working with JP Morgan Chase as a modeling and statistical analyst. I wanted a job in academia, but the market was really tight at the time. And also for international students, it's not as easy actually to be as competitive for a lot of jobs, unless you finished from certain programs, So I had that challenge starting out, and that's why I said in my presentation that where you started doesn't have to be where you end up. But one of the things that I find really helpful is being prepared for your dream job. So you can't just wish that you get there. So figure out what is it that are gaps in your training, so that when the market gets better and there are future opportunities, and there are always future opportunities, how have you enhanced your CV and your experiences from what you have in your hand right now? So it's really about transforming and enhancing what you have in your hand right now to help prepare you for the opportunities that will present themselves in the future. So times are tough right now, but there are things that you can be doing, even though they're challenging, to survive right now and to be prepared for when things get better.
Thank you. And Jeff, there is a question for you because you're not in the traditional academic environment. There's a question about starting a career transition where you're completely new to the field and not in the academic environment. How would you recommend finding the relationship and build up your capacity or finding a mentor in that perspective?
Well, I see Sarah Lowe's on this webinar, so maybe I'll call out Sarah here right now. Actually, I had an idea for a paper that I wanted to do. I knew I didn't really have maybe all of the technical skill set to do it on my own. And that was one issue, but I also wanted to use, I just didn't want to kind of write a paper and publish it. I also wanted to use the paper to you know, get better perspective on the topic and also, you know, explore opportunities with it. So one day I call Sarah kind of out of nowhere. I didn't really know her very well at the time. I don't think she really knew me very well at the time, but I was like, I think I've kind of, you know, maybe met you once or twice. I have this idea, you know, do you want to do it with me? I don't mind doing the work, but I need someone to kind of help conceptualize it, do it properly, dot the I's, cross the T's, so on and so forth. And so that was, you know, I kind of lucked out in that sense. Sarah was very approachable, you know, and, you know, so that, you know, Sarah then kind of played a mentor role for me over the years. And so that was just an example where I kind of cold called someone. I thought that there was someone with a skill set that had some partial overlap with the topic that I wanted to pursue, and maybe could kind of help shape it and steer me in the direction that I wanted to go with it, where I wasn't able to do that on my own. So that was one. I mean, it's kind of what one came to mind. Sarah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I was going to call on Sarah too, because I know the two of you work together very closely. And Sarah, you need to sign up to be our storyteller next time for sure. All right, because
Kathleen,
Sarah has a. You have to.
I will be a storyteller.
You have to, but you want to follow up with Jeff's and help us to answer this question, since you made a transition between USDA and academic too, right?
Yeah, on the transition question, I just want to say thanks to Jeff, but I was glad he reached out. I think the two of us complement each other very well. I enjoy working with him. On the transition question, yeah, after 10 years at USDA and time before that at the Federal Reserve, I switched into academia 2 years ago, and I'm happy to chat with people who are facing that kind of decision. And I continue to mentor people at ERS that are, you know, thinking about starting at ERS, but worried that it will take them out of academia. And I think, you know, just as Titus said too, I think that if you maintain relationships, keep coming to AAEA, participate in these, you know, every other month kind of conversations, it's very easy to maintain those ties. And like Jeff reached out to me, just don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think as a discipline, we're going to be stronger if we have strong ties with our colleagues in industry, strong ties with our colleagues in government, strong ties with our colleagues in academia. So I'd love to see stronger ties across all of those, and that will make switching and job hopping easier, and I think it'll make us a more productive group.
Great. Now we have a few more minutes. I'm going to start with Dave this time, because this is a very deep question, very deep. You really have to dig very deep to answer this question. And all 5 panelists will take some time to answer this one. This one is, can you share your typical day being where you are at this point? We'll start with David. What is your day like, David?
Okay. I don't know, my day really, if I look at it, I do it very quick. It changed throughout my career. When I was a graduate student, I went to sleep late and I got up late. And I was really working a lot in the evening, and I really watched TV. For example, in the beginning, I watched TV about once or an hour or two a day in order to learn English. When you are a foreign student, you don't, especially for me, gosh, I knew Shakespeare, but I didn't know day-to-day stuff. So I would get up late, come to the department, work, and in the evening spend about an hour or 2 hours writing papers and stuff like this. The toughest thing in my life was being a faculty member. You have to get up early, you have to be respectable, you have to dress with adult clothes, you have to be presentable. Suddenly you are more than what you used to be. And then you become a parent. Now, basically, I get up in the morning, I Zoom like crazy. That's what is my main activity. And I teach. Me and my wife take the dog and walk for a walk for about 2 or 3 hours a day. And I call my grandchildren, and I really miss interacting with people. But I tell you what, the other thing that is really important, I think someone asked, what do you do if you don't have a job? Believe me, if I didn't get the job in Berkeley, I don't know what I will do. But even as a graduate student, all the time, I didn't find any job below me. I taught in San Francisco State. I taught in Lincoln University. I have much better stories from Lincoln University than from Berkeley. You know, it's half underworld. It's like a movie. So to some extent, don't really look at things. Try to find opportunities to be active and don't feel sad about yourself. The thing is with this qualification that you have, that people have, you may not end up in academia, which actually is not a tragedy. You may get up to go to a job in a company or in Google or in NGO or whatever. And all the time, try to be busy. The worst is to be stuck with yourself and feel that there's no way out, because there is always a way out, and generally the way out is better than you think. If there's one thing that I learned from economics is that if you are risk averse, you look at the future in a way that it's worse than it will be. The things that hurt you are the things that you don't expect. Things that you expect generally turn up to the better if you really try to be active rather than passive.
Thank you, David. Well said. Appreciate. How about you, Jeb? What's your day like?
I've really started subscribe. I actually go to this bed at the exact same time every night. I had sleeping problems for years, which is highly related to depression and anxiety and, you know, sometimes alcohol and other things. And so I go to bed at 10 o'clock every night. I read I'm reading the Sherlock Holmes anthology right now. I read one of those stories and I take a trazodone and it puts me out. And I get up at around 6 and I exercise. Some days I exercise and then I start working. And so for me, having that consistent routine has gotten my sleep back to a normal cycle, and being able to sleep normally means I can, you know, for me, I need 8 hours. And I think just appreciating whatever your body needs to honor that. And rather than, oh, I should work later and then I might sleep less, but I'll get more done. That's actually not really a solution in the long run, what I found out. So, you know, honoring your body's sleep and exercise schedule with a consistent routine for me has really helped.
Thank you so much, Jeff. We're only human. I appreciate that you share these important tips with us. How about you, Titus? What's your typical day like?
This is a tough question for me because I have a typical week, but not a typical day.
Well, typical week is just as good.
Yeah, so I can divide up my day into the ones I control and the ones I don't control as well. For the parts that I don't control as well, in my administrative role, I have a lot of meetings, and during COVID, it's been primarily Zoom. But I try to control some part of that because I also still like to maintain some intellectual curiosity and work. So I carve out sometimes a couple of days a week In the mornings, I don't like to have meetings when I can control it, so that my schedule allows me to think and to write. But to do that consistently, one thing I found out is that I need to take more control of the early part of my day. So I get up early. I tend to get up around 5. If I have major projects that I'm really behind on, I may get up a little earlier than that. And I just I get my coffee going, and then I just kind of get started. As I said before, I like to have a balance between different aspects of my life. So I have a prayer and meditation time in the mornings most of the time before I get started with the other parts of my day. But reading and writing is a big part of what really fills my cup and my bucket. So I make time for that. But a lot of my time is really responding to things that needs to be done in the department. And then in the evenings, I like to spend time with my family. So I do a lot of things with my children when they were younger. They're much more grown up now. But finding the right balance, and when the weather is good, I still like to play soccer. I pick up soccer with people or go to the gym. But it's been much harder to do that now. But I try to have a balance between the various areas in a typical week.
Thank you so much. How about you, Madhu? Your typical day?
All right. So I'm like Titus. I'm an early morning person. I like to get up, 5-ish, and that's the time that I like to, where I can do the things that require concentration. And so if I'm working on a paper or something, then that's what I like to do, not answer emails and things. And then, generally plan to go, either gym or walk or something. Takes about 45 minutes to an hour for that. We eat home cooked meals even in non-COVID times. So I like to spend some time preparing meals for the day. And then, my day now with various administrative responsibilities and so on is really split up in terms of lots of meetings and a lot of email that I need to keep up with. But I like to I like to block out some time for research in most days. And so do that, spend a lot of time, and the best part is talking with my graduate students and doing the research. That's a fun part of the day. And then, take some time off in the evening to unwind and clear my head, answer some emails before going to bed. And that's the day.
Great. Now you're going to add this AAEA president to your working hours now. That's going to take a lot of time. Yeah.
Let's sleep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, Yoko, you have young children, you have a family. What's your typical day like as a mother and a profession?
Well, so I did have such thing as a typical day before the coronavirus lockdown. But after March 15th of last spring, my children have been home all day. And so these days, it's like inter-household bargaining between my husband and I for who's going to be the lifeguard on duty when. And so it's interesting. I like to bring this idea of clear property rights. You have to start with clear property rights before you can bargain. And so at the beginning of the week, my husband and I decide the property rights, and then we start haggling from there. But I think during COVID times, it's good to acknowledge that even the best plans can all go to hell. And so, in our household, we're kind of dealing with mental health issues of our children. And so it's just really hard. Let's just acknowledge that.
Well, thank you all so much for participating in our event today. And this is just the beginning of getting to know everybody a little bit better. You see a lot of our names from publications, meeting times, emails, and so on and so forth. Now you know we as a human that we have similar challenges, similar barriers, just like everybody else listening today. Again, before you leave our meeting today, we would like to invite you to share your stories, no matter where you are at your career, whether you're a student, you're a faculty, you're an industry representative. Please leave your name and your email contact information in the chat box, and we will follow up with you to invite you and arrange future storytelling events with everybody. Without any further ado, we will give the presenters a round of applause for everybody. Thank you very much for your volunteer and outstanding performance. So Jessica